an opportunity for you to ask any question you'd like of the two experts here on this topic. So we have a couple of hands up, so we get microphones to those places. Yes, first.
Yeah, Larry Moore from NICA South Australia. Look, I'm a member of the TRA Local Trades Committee for some 15 years, and I often advise people overseas to come here on a 457 and come through the process of TRA, because I think it's a good process. I don't normally agree with people like Eamon, being from Belfast myself, but I do in this respect, 100%. I think, and I have great difficulty at times when electricians come to me, very highly skilled electricians from Scotland, Ireland or wherever, and they have to go through a process of getting employment without a licence and finding it extremely difficult. And I think the process Eamon talked about of having the assessment, the context if you like, you want to call it that, in Ireland or England or wherever it is, should happen. Because if you take away the ARTC process, it makes it very difficult for people to get a licence in this country.
We take that as a comment?
Can I just...
Melissa, you'd like to add something to that?
Yeah, look, can I just say that one of the reasons why we're not just bowling ahead and repealing the Act this week is because we do recognise that the ARTC fills a really important gap at the moment, and that it is complicated, it is challenging, and we want to make sure that before we move to remove what we already have, that we have a process in place. That we have a process in place that will be relatively straightforward, but without diminishing quality, for people to take that to be able to get a licence. But one of the things that really did galvanise us into action is the fact that if the National Occupational Licensing Scheme goes ahead as it's currently intended to, the ARTC will not be accepted for licensing purposes anyhow. So it's kind of reached a point where a number of factors mean we need to act on this. And while not to diminish the role of the ARTC, which is an extremely important one at the moment, we need to find a way forward. So that's what we're hoping and looking for ideas about how we can do that in most effectively for people who are both already onshore and offshore.
Okay, next was, we've got a couple of hands up here. Yeah, just...
Joe Calabrese. I'm lucky enough to work in the gas industry where we don't have too many complications based on licensing and other issues. I do a fair bit of work in West Australia, and one of my clients through 457 visas does bring a lot of people over, mostly from England, Scotland or Ireland, and I'm finding that their skill level is significantly higher than some of the people that are currently working in our industry for a whole range of reasons, and very rigorous and long-term structured programs that we're only just really starting to bring into here. The advantage is that we don't have those licensing complications, but there's still that expectation that our system's better, and these guys are still forced to, and I use the word forced, to go for a fairly lengthy program, just as if they were a first-year apprentice. And what we're finding is that they're just completely disheartened. They can't progress to the next level. They're restricted in pay level and a whole range of things. When I come into it, recognise their skills, and suddenly they achieve a certificate that they require, and they get the recognition they're supposed to. So when it works well, it works really well. And I'm not suggesting you do that with any country, but recognition, the City of Guilds and other respected organisations should be much smoother.
Yeah, look, this is one of the things that with our knowledge bank and that process we'd like to be able to do, is be able to look at qualifications from certain countries and be able to see that they can pass through processes more quickly because we know that they are more closely benchmarked. Some of the issues you're talking about are quite potentially industrial ones as well. But the other problem is that I think a lot of RTOs still struggle with how to deal with people who present to them with qualifications from overseas, because it's quite a different RPL type process from other RPL processes that we're used to, and it can be quite a disheartening process. I mean, we do get quite a few letters from people who have found challenges in terms of areas and feel that they've, you know, I've been through this process and this happened and that happened. And while that's sort of anecdotal, what we'd like to make sure is that we can streamline it as much as possible. Because people from overseas, whether our system might altogether be better or not, many of them, most of them who are coming to Australia are highly skilled individuals, and doesn't help them, and it certainly doesn't help our economic growth if we don't provide them with occupations that allow them to utilise those skills.
Yes.
Darryl Hills from ACT Industry Training Board. Eamon, I'm not sure. One of the things that I don't think you've raised in your area is that about the gap training is actually the difference in the wiring rules in your country to the wiring rules in our country. Now, I'm also involved with one of the RTOs in Canberra about doing capstone testing, and some of the gap people that come to those, even though they've had 12 months experience after coming from Ireland, England or Scotland, South Africa, they still have a difficulty in doing the testing side and understanding the earthing system that we have in Australia. So they certainly still need that practical experience. Their technical knowledge of off-the-job training is probably as good or better than what Australia's is. So there's no problem there. But certainly in the gap, there is a bit of a problem with the knowledge area of the wiring rules.
Comment, Ben?
Well, how complex is it? You know, the principles are the same, the methods are the same. We have had people in their thousands coming to Ireland from Poland, Russia, from the UK, down from Northern Ireland, all different regs, all different processes, and they managed to come into Ireland and work to the Irish standards, and I can assure you the Irish standards are as rigorous as they are here. So it's not rocket science, and the people that try to make it look like rocket science, I think, are people who have some other vested interest. But maybe I'm wrong. Again, I keep saying I have never been on the ground, I've never worked on the ground here, so I can't say it from that, I'm an expert in that sense. But when you look what can happen everywhere else, it can happen everywhere else. If all the people that have come into Ireland, as I said, and it's never been a problem. So why is it such a huge problem here? I can't understand why it is. If there are differences, the differences can be taught. The regulations are regulations, that's paper-based. People can understand them, can learn them. And you know, there's no level, I don't believe the level of complexity is such that it should take 12 months. It just doesn't make any sense to me, I'm afraid.
Eamon, Justin Bussey from Charles Darwin University. I'm about to interview a guy from Ireland next week for an electrical lecturer's position. He's been through the TRA process. We've found him on the DEAC website. And I want 3 more because their knowledge is far better. The wiring rules, all that kind of stuff. I'm not a Sparky, but Sparkies and plumbers in Australia are just over-regulated. I don't know, something's going on there. But the rest of the trades seem to be able to get on with the world and do stuff. So I really think, I mean, we've got a pretty tough training package, the electrical one as it is. But certainly the city and guilds from, you know, England and across there, they're all really good quals. Really good knowledge comes out of that. But again, I'd like to see, you know, more. I mean, in Darwin, we've got quite a big workforce of Irish guys and women, and it helps our economy. We're the same. We're going into oil and gas industry, huge need for instrumentation, electrical quals, and it's going to be a lot of pressure in the NT, and we're going to start looking. I mean, NT government goes over every few months to Ireland to try and sell moving to the NT. So I'd certainly be keen to see some relaxation of what is currently happening and see, you know, that we recognise the Irish guys, English, a bit better than what we are at the moment. The guy I'm taking on, he won't be able to get an Australian licence for a year. And somehow as a lecturer I've got to also send him out to the workforce to get work. I don't know how we're going to do it, but under our new vet regulator as well, we've got issues there that by bringing these guys in, they should have a licence. So again, we're going to have issues there, but we need to work around it. We just haven't got the staff in Australia to meet the need of current training that we're doing.
We've obviously got different points of view in the room. We could have different between nations as well, not surprisingly. But can we just have a comment on that, Melissa?
We have to work within the current licensing approaches. We'd like to work closely with regulators to make sure they're as streamlined as possible. I'm not sure what I assume that that people coming out will need to have industry currency. I don't know that they need to have a license to teach. I'm not sure about that, Bob. Do you know? Yeah, I think as long he probably doesn't. Your lecturer probably won't require a license. So it'll just require to have local industry knowledge under the ASQA requirements. But it is a challenge. We want to make sure that people have the right skills. For us, because the key is employability from TRA's viewpoint, we need to make sure they're going to meet the requirements of the regulators here. But the issue of the gap training and how long it takes and where it can be done is something that we're always willing to have a conversation about. We just need to make sure that that conversation includes the people who ultimately are the arbiters of whether these people will be able to work in the industry or not, and that's the regulators.
Peter from VetAssess again. Another question. I'm interested in with the Irish people that come over and they get a TRA certificate, they go to the regulator, they do a short course and they get a full licence. Then they've come over on a working visa, and I've assessed a few of them, and some of them actually have 3 state licences. They might have a licence from New South Wales, Queensland, WA. But because they've come over on a working visa, and if they want to stay, they've got to do the OTSR. So they come in, they do their OTSR, and then basically they've got a certificate through and they've got permanency. That's another way some of the candidates do it. They don't do the OTSR first and then do the gap training. They come over on a working visa and then they do their requirements for each state and get a full licence that way.
Yes, at the moment there are a number of pathways, and what we'd like to do is make sure that they are all aligned. To me, it does seem a little silly that people who've already got licences then have to go back through the OTSR process. But that's actually a DIAC requirement, an immigration requirement as well. Again, one of the things we'd like to look at as we look at potentially repealing the ARTC or stopping the ARTC process is how we can make sure that all of these things are lined up so that people aren't having to be subject to 3 or 4 different processes, because that just seems overkill.
Okay, question at the back.
Ian Neeson, EEOS. Matter of clarification. Yesterday, those who were present at the industry forums, there was a forum given by a regulator who happens to be in a position who regulates not only just the electrical trades, plumbing trades and the building industry. And he cited the poor standards and the defects that he had to impose right from the top, from those that do the engineering design as well as those right down to the tradespeople. Now, Australia has a standard. We're trying to lift our standard. In the last 10 years, I'd say the standard of trades we put out hasn't been desirable. A lot of them don't know how to apply the wiring rules and they get defected when they get caught out. We have a standard we must meet, and we don't want to dumb down that standard, irrespective of what lecturers and teachers might have said about how easy it is to teach these people. They're not succeeding, and there is enough evidence to say that a number of them don't meet assessment requirements and licensing requirements. And not only goes for the overseas students, but it's happening to some of our people going through our system. And so we've got to maintain it. We want to maintain a standard and not have defects. The community at the end of the day expects when they engage a tradesperson, that tradesperson comes along and does a job to the standard so that their the work they've done in the electrical industry is safe for them to use and is not going to cause problems in the future. So I think that's a comment on my part, and I think it should be understood by the people here talking about standards in immigration. Thanks.
Okay, we'll take that as a comment. And one last question, Peter.
This is really for Melissa to comment on. It's an issue about consistency. It's an area that I know a little bit about, but what we've got is a number of systems that allow skill migration into country, and there's a number of visas that apply. There is your permanent migrant. Permanent migrant can obviously seek to make application under TRA. In some countries they're required to go through an OTSR, but an OTSR is not uniformly applied across all nations seeking permanent migration. The TRA certificate, the ARTC, the problem with that is that it was developed at a time when it reflected what the skill requirements were in Australia, not what our skill requirements are. It has never been aligned to our training package for electrical workers. The problem with undertaking the practical experience that was raised by Eamon is that during our apprenticeship program, we required that the apprentices get that practical experience during their nominal 4-year period. So if we're looking at consistency, we need to make sure if a worker coming in from overseas under the brand name of electrician has the same consistency as the person he's working alongside who went through the Australian system. The old ARTC was the Australian Recognised Trade Certificate, which was the equivalent of the apprenticeship certificate. It's now out of date, and that's why the recognition by regulators is now at question. But the problem I've got is that DIAC, and it's not necessarily Melissa's problem, she's the one that has to deal with the problem they create, is that we have different standards. Some countries require OTSRs for permanent migration. Some countries now under the 457 require OTSRs. Some countries don't require for 457 applicants actually any assessment at all. You can in fact bring an electrician in from a country overseas, provide the employer is satisfied that they have the skills, then they can make application. Now, one of the problems that we have is that we don't believe the employers in a lot of instances have the capacity to make that judgment. So what we've been trying to drive towards is consistency, so that we have a consistent arrangement. If you're a skilled worker in a licensed trade, whether you come from Ireland, India, the Philippines, the UK or the USA, that you have exactly the same criteria, because at the end of the day you're going to be working alongside another person who is relying on your skills for their health and safety. The problem I've got is at a DIAC level, because they're focused on bringing people into Australia, not necessarily their skills, they don't necessarily deal with the problems that we see as paramount. They refer them to poor Melissa's area, where she then has a variety of different options to look at because of the views of the Department of Immigration, not necessarily that of the Department of Innovation. Would you like to comment on that?
Thanks, Peter. Firstly, what I'd say, consistency is absolutely the thing that we're trying to strive for, making sure that we've got a consistent level of people coming in. And it is one of our challenges with the ARTC, is that it is out of date and it is not aligned to anything else that happens in the system at all anymore. And local committees do apply their craft slightly differently in different states. So we want to look at how can we be more consistent. Yes, there are challenges in that in the 457 space. There are only, I think, 10 countries where there are assessments required before people come into the country. And for example, in plumbing, there are no requirements for anyone on 457s. So we need to. We're trying to work both with DIAC to make sure that their regulations, their requirements and our ability to provide match up. And this was one of the reasons why we moved to introduce an optional skills assessment process for people coming from countries, particularly the high volume countries. As I said in my presentation, I think it's unlikely that we're ever going to have an RTO in every country in the world. When someone wants to come from Kazakhstan, that it's going to be a challenge to have someone there to do a skills assessment for them. But for the countries that we know are high volume, places like Ireland and the UK and Philippines and Poland at the moment, we can provide those services before people come into the country. And we're trying to move towards a greater level of consistency. We're trying to move towards filling the gaps that the visa system has in place, so that we can try and get people through a streamlined and consistent process as much as possible. But again, without sacrificing the requirements of quality, because I absolutely agree with the speaker from the back that we don't want to just dumb down our standards. It's very important that people who are coming to Australia are going to meet the requirements that they have, that we have within our system. I mean, we have requirements for a reason, and that's because it's an industry benchmark for what is needed for people to work in those occupations. So it's important that we maintain those industry benchmarks, and we make sure that people coming from overseas can attain those, but we want to make sure that the process is the most sensible process it can be. And we're not quite there yet.
Thank you. We must end it there. We're running into lunch, so yeah. So we must. Sorry, end it up there. Oh, only because she's a CEO, but that's.
I take Eamon's point about the skills of Irish electricians, because I've actually been over there and had a look. With Eamon, by the way. It's a long couple of weeks. But we're really quite unique in that we have what we call competency standards, which include the theory component and the on-the-job component. And that, if you read our units, it actually says you have to apply that unit of competence in the Australian context. And I'll take Eamon's point, these Irish electricians are really quite skilled in the craft of being an electrician. However, if you're going to get a qualification, Cert 3 electrician, then if you're going to issue that qualification, you have to prove that that person can apply those skills in the Australian workplace. Now, you can't do that overseas. And that's the issue we've got. You can do the theory component of the gap training, and we've tried that in a pilot, which was really a bit of a headache, but we trialled it. But the on-the-job context, which is in the unit, has to be in Australia. So the gap has to be in Australia. You can't issue that full gap training in Ireland or England or Kenya or anywhere else. You can do the theory component, but you can't do the on-the-job. And we're stuck with that system because our units of competence are based on the workplace in Australia. So when they come here, the provisional licence is for 12 months. However, the benchmark is in points. So if somebody enrolls in an e-profiling profile, all it does, the provisional licence, is gives people the opportunity to reach the benchmark within 12 months. So there's some confusion out there of what the gap training is. We can't issue a qualification, Cert 3 electrician, in our package unless they've actually applied that skill in Australia. And that's the problem we have. And Eamon, I'm one of the rocket scientists that designed the GAPS system. I apologise for the imposition for Irish electricians, but that's for every electrician. That's not just the ones in Ireland. And in England, if you can work out their licensing system with their gold card system, good luck, because there's about 6 variations of licences in England that says you're an electrician. And it is a pain in the neck. My compatriot here actually saw, about 5 versions of the gold card in England when we're there. City and Guilds, I don't think it's an issue, but anything else, and it's you punch the ticket and get a licence. So it's something that is a problem, and I take Eamon's point, but that's the reason why the gap training is like it is, and we have no choice. If we're going to issue an Australian qualification, the gap training has to be applied in Australia. End of story.
Thanks, Bob. Would you thank Melissa and Eamon for their presentations here?